All right, let's dive into something pretty fundamental today. Something we all deal with, but maybe don't always think too deeply about.
Hmm, sounds intriguing already. What are we tackling?
Respect. How it works in the workplace, especially with all this talk about AI and changing ways of working.
Respect. I see where this is going. You got that presentation about respect as the foundation for agile empowerment.
You got it. It really got me thinking about how respect plays out in different work cultures. Like what does respect actually look like in a traditional waterfall setup versus a more agile environment?
And of course, how AI might be shaking things up even further.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The presentation really jumped right into this comparison of waterfall and agile. It's like they have entirely different views of, well, people.
Yeah, it is striking how different they are. You could almost say Waterfall starts from this um,
Well,
assumption.
an assumption.
Yeah, that people are kind of inherently lazy, like they need to be told exactly what to do or they'll just slack off.
Whoa, that's a pretty cynical view, isn't it?
Yeah. It is, and that's why the presentation called out how waterfall can sometimes lead to this idea of workers essentially stealing salaries.
Oof, I remember that line. That's intense. It's no wonder that kind of thinking can breed some pretty toxic workplaces.
Right. When you don't trust your team from the get-go, it's hard to build a positive and respectful culture.
Totally. So how does Agile flip the script on that?
Well, Agile is all about empowerment, right?
Yeah.
Trusting your team, giving them autonomy, and fostering that whole servant leadership thing.
Servant leadership. Okay, that's what I'm always curious about. How can a leader be a servant? Doesn't that seem a little contradictory?
It's less about, literally serving people and more about shifting the focus
Shifting the focus how?
from command and control to support. So instead of saying, do this, do that, a servant leader is more likely to ask, what do you need from me? Or how can I help you succeed?
Interesting. So it's about removing obstacles and empowering the team to do their best work.
That's the idea. And the presentation really emphasized how that kind of leadership style, built on respect and trust, ultimately leads to better results.
Makes sense. Happier employees, better communication, more innovation. It's like a domino effect.
Hmm.
But I'm curious, how does this big picture philosophy of respect actually show up in the day-to-day?
That's where it gets really interesting. Because respect isn't just about grand gestures, it's about all those little things we do.
Little things.
Yeah, like the presentation actually starts with something super basic, meeting etiquette.
Meeting etiquette.
Mm,
I wouldn't have thought of that as a hotbed of respect issues.
right. But it makes a good point. Like, how do you show up to meetings? Do you show up on time? Are you prepared?
Those things definitely matter. I've been in those meetings where it feels like some people's time is valued more than others.
Exactly. And that can be really disrespectful, even if it's unintentional.
Like you're saying, my time is more important than yours.
That's one way to look at it. And another everyday example the presentation talks about is active listening. Really taking the time to hear and understand what someone's saying, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
That's huge. Active listening can be so powerful, especially when you're trying to build trust and rapport.
Absolutely. And it ties into another big theme from the presentation, psychological safety.
Psychological safety. I'll be honest, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one.
I think a lot of people are. There are these misconceptions that it's all about creating this super happy, conflict-free
Like
workplace.
everyone has to agree all the time and never disagree.
Yeah, and the presentation makes it clear that's not what psychological safety is about. It actually quoted this Harvard professor, Amy Edmondson, who defines it as, well, it's about feeling safe enough to take risks.
Risks. What kind of risks?
Interpersonal risks.
Yeah.
Like feeling comfortable enough to speak up, even if you disagree with the boss, or to admit you made a mistake without fearing negative consequences.
Oh, I see. So it's less about avoiding conflict and more about creating a space where people can be honest and vulnerable without being punished for it.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of candor and respect, where people feel empowered to share their true thoughts and feelings, even the tough ones.
That makes a lot of sense. It reminds me of a time when it makes you wonder, where does AI fit into all of this whole respect thing?
Now, that's where the presentation gets super interesting. It asks this question, do we even owe AI respect?
Huh. I've got to admit, I've never thought about it like that. It's not like AI has feelings, right? I mean, we're not going to hurt a chatbot's feelings by, being rude.
You're right. But the presentation brings up a really thought-provoking point. It's not about whether AI deserves respect. It's about how our interactions with AI might change how we treat other humans.
Oh, that's kind of freaky. It'd
Yeah.
be like if we get used to just bossing AI around, expecting it to do whatever we say.
Exactly. It can become a habit, you know? And that habit might spill over into how we communicate with our colleagues, our families, you name it.
Wow, so even if AI isn't sentient, our interactions with it could still have these ripple effects on how we treat each other.
Right. And think about it, it goes beyond just those individual interactions.
Okay, how so?
Well, the presentation talked about how AI can shape the entire work environment.
Like in a good way or a bad way?
Both, actually. Think about it. AI can easily be used in ways that are, well, kind of disrespectful.
I've heard those stories. Like companies using AI to constantly monitor employees, tracking their every keystroke, analyzing their
Yeah.
facial expressions during meetings. It feels, well, creepy.
It is. The presentation used the example of AI surveillance as like a cautionary
It's
tale.
like Big Brother, right?
Yeah.
Always watching.
Yeah. And it creates this atmosphere of distrust, like everyone's a suspect. It totally kills that psychological safety we were talking about.
People are going to clam up. They're not going to speak their minds if they feel like they're constantly being judged or monitored.
Exactly. But here's the good news. AI can also be used in ways that promote respect and empowerment.
Okay, now that's what I want to hear.
Right. Like, imagine if AI could take over all those boring, repetitive tasks we all hate, free up our time to focus on more creative, more meaningful work.
That would be amazing. And honestly, it
Mhm.
feels way more respectful than making people do busy work just to prove they're working.
The presentation also mentioned AI for things like personalized feedback and coaching. Imagine a virtual mentor that could help you develop your skills in a way that's, actually helpful and encouraging.
That would be so cool, like having a custom-made development program just for you.
Exactly. AI could also be used to facilitate better communication and collaboration,
How so?
like tools that help translate languages, break down complex jargon, or even spot potential misunderstandings in communication.
Yeah, that's using AI in a way that truly supports human connection. It's not about replacing people, but about helping us understand each other better.
Right. The key takeaway, I think, is that it all comes down to how we choose to use AI.
You mean, are we using it to build a more humane workplace? Or are we using it to, control and micromanage people?
Exactly. And honestly, those aren't always easy questions to answer.
It's complex.
It is. And that's why we need to be having these conversations, really thinking critically about how AI fits into our values.
And respect should be a core value, right?
Absolutely. This whole conversation has been really eye-opening. It's made me realize how multifaceted respect is, especially in this age of AI.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
Yeah. But one thing that really stood out to me from the presentation was the link between respect and, well, results.
Oh, right. It wasn't just about feeling good. Respect actually leads to better performance.
When people feel respected, they're more engaged, they're more productive, they go the extra mile.
It's amazing that more companies haven't figured that out. It seems like a no-brainer. Respect equals better business,
You'd think so. But I guess some workplaces are still stuck in that old school mentality.
where respect is seen as a weakness or something.
Yeah, something like that. Luckily, there are folks out there challenging those old ways of thinking. And presentations like the one we're talking about are helping to spread the word.
It's all about those everyday actions, right? How we communicate, how we listen, how we use technology.
Right. And that brings me to the part of the presentation that really stuck with me.
I'm all ears.
It was this simple question at the end. How can you ensure that every interaction you have, whether it's with a human or with AI, is grounded in respect?
Whoa. That's powerful. It's a challenge to all of us.
It is. It's made me way more conscious of how I interact with, well, everyone and everything.
We need to make respect the norm.
I completely agree. And the presentation is a great starting point for anyone who wants to start cultivating more respect in their work and life.
And speaking of that, we should remind everyone where they can find it.
Oh, yeah. The link to the full video presentation is in the description.
Go check it out. We'd love to hear your thoughts. It really is incredible how much power there is in respect.
It's true. Just that one simple concept can have such a huge ripple effect on our well-being, how our teams function, even how well organizations perform.
And I think the presentation did a really great job of, like, illuminating all those different facets of respect, all those little things we might not always think about.
Yeah, like the connection between respect and psychological safety. Remember, we were talking about how it's not just about being nice or avoiding conflict.
It's more about creating that space where people feel safe to speak their minds, share ideas, even challenge the way things are done without being afraid of getting punished for it.
Right. And that kind of environment where everyone feels valued and heard, that's where the real magic happens.
Like that's where true innovation comes from. And ultimately, that's what leads to success in the long run.
Makes you wonder, right? How many great ideas never see the light of day because people were afraid to speak up?
It's a good point. It
Hmm.
really highlights the responsibility leaders have to set the tone. Create a culture where respect is baked in from the start.
And it's not just on leaders either. I mean, we all have a part to play, each of us.
Absolutely. Those everyday interactions, they matter. How we listen, how we talk to each other, how we handle disagreements.
It's being mindful, aware of how our actions impact others, even in those little moments.
And then as we were talking about earlier, it's also about how we're using technology, like
But,
AI.
oh, absolutely. We got to make sure we're using AI in a way that supports people, that enhances our humanity and dignity, not the opposite.
It's like a reminder that technology should be a tool for good.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, and honestly, this is just the tip of the iceberg,
Respect is a big topic. There's always more to learn.
for sure. And if you're ready to dive in deeper, you know what to do. Check out that presentation.
The link is in the description.
It's packed with insights and tips, and honestly, it might just change the way you think about respect.
So we encourage you to give it a watch. Think about the things we've talked about today and see if you can bring a little more respect into your own little corner of the world.
That's a great way to put it. Until next time, folks, keep exploring and stay curious.